Shalom Chaverim. Another Wednesday night. We're now on daylight savings time, and the debate is still out about daylight going on standard time, daylight savings time. There are a lot of articles that have been written, but my topic tonight is not about daylight savings time, and we had a nice pleasant day here in the nation's capital. The weather is good. Our topic this evening is the holiday of Purim. Purim begins Thursday night and into Friday. Remember that Judaism uses a solar-corrected lunar calendar. Islam uses a lunar calendar that is not corrected by the sun. That's why when the fast of Ramadan, the observance, falls 6-7 days later each year and goes around the calendar. And sometimes I know people say to me, Ramadan or when, and when was it last year? We're used to the secular Gregorian calendar that has things on fixed dates. While both Judaism and Islam use a lunar calendar, the dates can float. But within Judaism, we correct with the sun. So there's a limit to when the holidays can move. And it is written in Scripture, the book of Genesis, there was evening and morning one day. So, according to the text, the day begins at sundown and then ends at the next sundown. It's odd that midnight is when we change our day. That's a committee decision. And it's really hard to see. You know when the sun rises, you can see when the sun sets. And so it's easier to fix time before the atomic clock with observations. And for Islam, the month of Ramadan is still done by sightings. They still sight the moon, and there's a committee and there's some charts that make the official pronouncement, because the day in Islam, like in Judaism, begins at sundown. So the holiday of Purim begins Thursday night, and then Purim is Friday. So you may hear about different observances about the holiday of Purim. Now I see many of you want to be invited as a guest, and the answer is certainly. I would love for you to co-host with me next Wednesday night. Send me an email, rabbiblock@hotmail.com, and we'll pick a topic. We'll figure out how 2 of us, 3 of us, 4 of us, as many of you as would like to be on live next Wednesday night. Email me. So I'm already answering you. Yes. Okay. Someone said, may I ask a question in the comments? Certainly. Go ahead. So the holiday of Purim celebrates the Book of Esther. Esther is a novella. Esther is fiction. And so we want to keep in mind that the Torah, the Bible, Tanakh, is truth and it's not true. Okay? And so we want to approach the text. What is the moral lesson? What is the teaching? What is the truth? And not get bogged down in the fact that the story never happened. The Haman and the king picking a queen from a beauty pageant, none of that is supported anywhere in any history that anyone has been able to find. But that's not important. We want to be very careful not to miss the truth of the Bible, because we get so absorbed in trying to find Noah's Ark or a piece of the Ark, or where was the Garden of Eden actually. That really is defocusing. It draws us away from what is the truth, what is the teaching. These are vehicles. They're parables, their allegories, their stories, their history with a twist, their history with an agenda. All kinds of things are going on. So we don't want to get bogged down in trying to decide about true. So let's get back to the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther is a novella. It was written long after the story that it's telling. The story takes place in Persia, which is modern-day Iran. And I think that given what is going on, I'm just stopping to read some of the comments. It's significant because Iran is the problem in the Middle East. Iran is the enemy. Islam is not. Jews are not. Israel is not. Gaza is not. We are being led astray. We're defocusing. We're looking the wrong way. Iran is funding terrorism. Iran is supporting Hamas and Hezbollah. The Palestinians aren't supporting Hamas. They're not funding it. It's coming from Iran. And the influence is so overwhelming that it's significant that our story of Esther, the story of Purim, the Book of Esther, takes place in ancient Persia. And the story is about a king who loves to party, and he's not that concerned with the government. He's not concerned with being the king. He's not that concerned with running the day-to-day country. And so his prime minister, Haman, starts telling him stories. I'm just shaking my head at some of the questions. He tells the king, Ahasuerus, that there is a people living in Persia that doesn't support him, that's going to overthrow the government. It's all kinds of bad things. And then he says, these are the Jewish people. Scapegoating. And we hear it today. Different politicians, different political parties, different religions will scapegoat. They'll find someone, some religion, something, and blame them for a problem that indeed is not created by them and has nothing to do with them. But we're human beings, and we want to blame someone. And so there are organizations that will scapegoat, will point a finger, and use hate and start agitating. And the reality is it's just not true. It's more or less a we. That we elect politicians, we collect taxes, we create budgets, we allocate money, we do all these things. And often they lead to not so much problems, to a result we don't want or what we're not looking for. And so someone else comes along and points a finger and say, oh, this is because of Muslims, this is because of Jews, this is because of blacks, this is because, and it's just not true. It isn't. No. But getting back to our story of Purim, the king Ahasuerus starts listening to the prime minister. And there's no one to balance it out. And so our story continues that he's looking for a new queen. And so, given Ahasuerus is the party guy, he decides to have a beauty pageant. And if anyone is interested in the historic accuracy of the Book of Esther, please email rabbiblock@hotmail.com, and I'll be glad to talk to you, review the information, the data, about the historic accuracy of the book, if you're curious about that. But as I mentioned, let's put that aside and talk about truth, what's going on. Okay. So there is a Jewish gentleman named Mordecai and his niece. And her name happens to be Hadassah. And maybe you've heard of the Jewish organization called Hadassah. It's named after Esther. But she takes on the Persian name of Esther. And Uncle Mordecai convinces Esther to enter the pageant. Okay. She reluctantly agrees. Now, someone just asked again the question, my stance on Palestine, that keeps coming up. I would suggest any of you that want to know my views on what's going on in the Middle East, you can go to my YouTube channel, The Rabbi and I. The last 10 episodes deal with the question. You can go to my podcast, The Rabbi and I, and you can go to Live from America podcast, Live from America YouTube channel. I was their guest a week ago, and our topic was the politics and what's going on in Gaza, Palestine, Israel, the Middle East. So for those of you asking the question, there are two sources where you can get my opinion, as opposed to my taking the time this evening, which I just did. Okay, so Esther decides to enter the contest, but she doesn't tell anyone she's Jewish, that she's a Hebrew. Okay? And so things begin to unfold, and she wins. She now becomes the queen of Persia. Now, the Prime Minister Haman is still pushing to destroy all Jews. Anti-Semitism, political power, gaining authority, for whatever causes someone to scapegoat and use someone else to rise to power, Haman represents that. See, there's part of our truth. We always look in history. We can always find Stalin, Hitler. We can always find individuals who use the structure and the society to get in a position to destroy it. However, in the end, as we see with the story of Purim, it never has worked. So if we go back through history, if we look at all the despots, if we look at all the individuals that rose to power based on belittling other people, based on hate, it always ends, maybe not in our lifetime, but when we look at history. And so Esther is now queen. Haman has plotted and convinced King Ahasuerus that the Jews have to go. They have to be destroyed. Esther is deeply troubled. So she goes to Uncle Mordecai, and she says to him, the king is an autocrat. He's a dictator. It's not that like the kings of England, Germany, Scotland, France, where the king and queen talked to each other, they had conversations. She said, I can't have anything with him. I can ask for an audience. And so there's a good historical book, that series that covers the Jewish history being the Torah. No, to answer your question, you really have to go to different websites. If you're going to look, the Torah is historically accurate. However, the individual figures are not true. We know events. Archaeology has gone a long way to outline the tribes, the movement, the customs, the traditions. But what archaeology hasn't been able to prove is, was there a man named Moses? Was there a man named Abraham? Did Sarah exist? What we do have is this very good history of a nomadic people, the Hebrews. Now, the word Ivrim, Hebrew, means from across the river. And so the story in the Torah begins across the river with Abraham. And then he ends up in the land of Canaan. And so the people there have this immigrant coming, and they give him the name he's a Hebrew. He's an Ivrim. He's a Hebiru. He's a Hyksos. 3 different names appear, which all mean individuals that came from across the river. Now, we're talking about 5,000 years ago or more. So by the time it comes down, the Hebrew people are entrenched on the land. So it's not as if they're second generation or third generation. And many of the original peoples are long gone. So someone who asked about good history, you can go to different websites, and what you'll piece together is the Torah is historically accurate with events, with the tribes, with the movement, with the settling, with Joshua across the land, with the prophets. That's all historically accurate. But what's missing are individual names of the people. And so that's why I keep saying the Torah is truth and it's not true. There's our truth. So Esther goes to Uncle Mordecai. What do I do? I can't just talk to him. I'm going to have to ask for an audience. Now here's a great line. Mordecai says to his niece, oh, there's no mention of God anywhere in the Book of Esther. Nowhere. No, it's a novella. It's fiction. Different kind of, but it's truth. So Mordecai says to Esther, who knows? Perhaps this is why you were made queen of Persia, to intercede and save the Jewish people. What a great truth. Think of our own lives. Think of different moments. Maybe this is why I'm here. Perhaps this is what I'm supposed to do. Israel is mentioned in ancient Egypt. Israel is mentioned, Palestine, Israel. It's mentioned in Roman history, Assyrian history, Babylonian history. Everyone's recognizing the Hebrews, the Jewish people. So that's not the question about the historic accuracy. I'm separating 2 things here. It is historically accurate. However, until later, when history becomes more exact and mentions names, which is Herodotus, starts what we think of as modern history. So that's much later, and starts putting in names and people, and then they're in documents, they're in pillars, and we can get more about the individual's interaction within the historic context. But the historic context of Torah is true. Okay? Just not. All right, enough of that. So, Uncle Mordecai says, perhaps this is why you were made queen. And I would say to you listening, watching, perhaps you got that promotion because perhaps you got that job because perhaps you found an individual, you have a relationship, okay? And then it doesn't have to be as dramatic as Esther interceding to save the Jewish people. because that's why it's a novella. That's why we're on television, on the Lifetime channel. That's Hollywood, making it dramatic. But my life and your life, we get up, go to work. Well, I'm retired now, but we have a tour of duty. We fulfill our obligations. We have relationships with other human beings. Yeah, now someone just said in Esther, God's name is written in secret in Hebrew. I would say to you, please, let's talk about it. I want to see that. I do not want to dismiss anything until I've seen the proof and evidence, because every so often someone brings something up. I had no idea. But if you don't email me and we don't meet, then what you've just said is just wasted on me. But I would really like to see this God's secret name. I'm not being sarcastic, by the way, because that's how one learns, by listening to other people, by following their reasoning, by seeing how they got it. Now, gematria is very powerful. And if we want to use gematria, then maybe that's what you're referring to. And I'm a big fan of gematria. And so, but I'm not a big fan of secrets. I think one of the things that God has done for all of us is he hasn't made a secret of revelation. God has revealed himself in so many different ways, and that's why we have so many different religions. God in his infinite wisdom realized that one size doesn't fit all. And so, in God's infinite wisdom, he provided us with as many paths to God as there are blades of grass on the fairway. So, we have Islam, we have the Roman Catholic Church, we have Episcopalians, we have Roman Catholics, we have Methodists, we have Baptists, we have Buddhists, we have Hindu. That's why there's a plethora of... So God wouldn't make it a secret and keep things hidden from us. He provided a way for each of us to reach God through our own understanding, through our own metaphors. Hence, all the different religions, different ways, different paths. And so, Mordecai says to Esther, think about it. Perhaps this is why you're there. So Esther decides to throw a banquet. What else? Ahasuerus is a party guy. He comes to the first banquet. He's thrilled. Esther outdoes herself. She throws another party. He and his friends are even more thrilled. She throws another party. And right away, Ahasuerus is in love with Esther, the party girl. And so he says to her, anything, I will do anything for you that I can do, even if it means giving you half of my kingdom. And so Esther says, I don't want that. I just want you to pay attention to your prime minister who's making things up and wants to destroy the Jewish people. And his goal is to get all their money, all their property, all their possessions, not for you. Haman wants all of that for himself. He's your prime minister, but he's tricking you. And so Ahasuerus decides to sleep on it. And he goes through the records and he starts doing some research and he talks to some of his other advisors. And lo and behold, Ahasuerus realizes that his prime minister, Haman, is not looking out for Persia. Haman is looking out for Haman. And he's actually destroying the country, stealing the gold. He's channeling the taxes of Persia into his own pocket, not into the king's pocket. Okay? And I think someone just made a question about yarmulkes. I want to digress for a moment. In the Middle East, where Judaism and Islam grew up, one covers one's head as a sign of respect. When you see the diplomats from Muslim countries, from Saudi Arabia, from the Emirates, you see they wear kafiyah, they wear head coverings, because in the East, that's a sign of respect. Since Judaism grew up, it's an Eastern religion, the idea of wearing the yarmulke reverts back to that particular custom to show respect for God and other people. In the West, the tradition developed to uncover your head as a sign of respect. And so we don't do this anymore, but men used to tip their hats for women, and you tip your hat, you take your hat off when you walk into a church. So both are a sign of respect, and they're two different actions, but they're cultural, not religious. It's part of the culture to show humility and to cover your head, and that's the Eastern, the Jewish Muslim tradition. And in the West, you would uncover your head when you walk into a church, or you take your hat off when you walk into a store or a restaurant. Again, sign of respect. I think this is really very important because they're two different acts that accomplish the same goal, and they're both related to the culture, not to the religions. Okay? And so dress is the same way. Look at the Amish. Look at the Mennonite. If you look at different religious groups, you will find that many of them dress according to an older tradition that they came from. And it's a way for them to remind themselves who they are, and then to remind the rest of us who they are. And it always comes from... someone just posted, I can't write that down or follow. Please, rabbiblock@hotmail.com. Please email that to me. I want to look them up. I want to read that. Is it Gematria? Is that what we're doing here? And so King Ahasuerus realizes that Haman is fleecing the country. He's scalping everybody. He's pocketing the money. And this is getting rid of the Jews was just another way for him to make more money. Ahasuerus puts an end to it. He says, that's it, Haman. Not only are you no more prime minister, but you have committed a capital crime. I consider you to be wanting to overthrow the government. And so our story ends where Haman is hung for wanting to overthrow the kingdom of Ahasuerus. And so, a celebration, a party, dressing in costumes. The people are saved. King Ahasuerus realizes that he was making a mistake, and then he doesn't let Haman carry out his plan. And some of Haman's co-conspirators are hung as well, but not many. But basically, Ahasuerus just reasserts his authority as king of Persia. And that's Purim. I would be remiss if I didn't promote my book, How to Be Jewish in 30 Seconds. And if you'd like to know how to observe not just Purim, but other Jewish holidays, this is the book for you. And the cartoons alone are worth the price of the book, How to Be Jewish in 30 Seconds. And our YouTube channels, The Rabbi and I, and Live from America YouTube channel. And that's to address those of you who keep asking the questions about what are my beliefs going on with the politics with the Middle East, because it doesn't lend itself to one or two answers. And I've said before, I believe in two states that respect each other. I believe in two states that guarantee each other's freedom and don't attack each other. And that's up to politicians to sort out. Thank you all, and I look forward to meeting all of you again, or more of you, next Wednesday night at 8. Good night.